Welcome back, guys. Today we'll discuss Vulkan's fate after the Dropsite massacre of Isstvan V and his torture at the hands of Conrad Curze. So let's do this. Vulkan had survived the nuclear fire of the Iron Warriors' orbital strike, where so many of his sons did not. Finding himself surrounded by hundreds of traitor legionnaires from both the Night Lords and the Iron Warriors, Vulkan resigned himself to his fate. Fighting valiantly, the Primarch fought to the death, but was eventually overwhelmed by the sheer numbers of the enemy, and was shot, stabbed, and bludgeoned into unconsciousness. The Night Haunter, now inherently insane, saw the opportunity to torment his fallen brother, and took the unconsciousness Vulkan as his prisoner. When the Salamander's Primarch finally awoke, he found himself fitted in massive chains aboard a jail hulk belonging to the 8th Legion. Over the span of several months, the Night Haunter took sadistic pleasure in attempting to break both Vulkan's body and mind, or kill him outright, but the task proved impossible, as every time Curze thought he had succeeded in killing his brother, Vulkan's body would miraculously regenerate to its former healthy state. Vulkan had been revealed to be a perpetual, a being who was capable of continuous cellular regeneration and therefore was effectively immortal, much like their father, the Emperor of Mankind. Enraged, Curze took it upon himself to kill Vulkan as many times as was necessary to permanently rid himself of his intolerable presence. The Night Haunter personally beheaded the Salamander's Primarch, ripped out his throat with a piece of cutlery, stabbed him through the chest, and virtually tore him limb from limb with his own wicked claws. When these attempts failed to kill Vulkan, Curze had him eviscerated, shot at close range by hundreds of bolters, put into a ventilation shaft of a starship's engine, and even stripped naked and thrown out of an airlock into the airless void of space. But the Night Haunter's efforts proved all for naught. Each time the Night Haunter thought he had successfully murdered his brother Primarch, Vulkan's body would continue to regenerate back to its former vigorous state, further enraging the Night Lord's Primarch. With his unnatural abilities to regenerate revealed to him, Curze attempted to make Vulkan admit that he was no less a monster than himself. Vulkan was placed through unwinnable trials to break his spirit, having to pull against chains to prevent a ceiling in another cell from crushing its innocent occupants, being starved at a banquet table with mortal prisoners alongside him, watching the food decay and the prisoners wither away, being trapped in a battle plate and being unable to control his limbs and forced to hunt captured soldiers and other captured loyalist Astartes. To further torment his brother, the Night Haunter had Davanite sorcerer priests use the fell powers gifted to them by the Runis powers to ensnare Vulkan's mind and make him fight his brother Corax after a fictional rescue attempt. But even this form of sorceress torture failed to break the resolute Vulkan. Fed up with his insufferable prisoner and slaughtering the sorcerer priests, the Night Haunter devised a final solution to his problem of ridding himself of the Salamander's prisons. Vulkan's fate would be decided in a duel to the death. He offered his brother a means of escape and achieving that which he had sought for long, his freedom. All he had to do was navigate a labyrinth, where at the center of it lay his personal warhammer, Dawnbringer. But this was no ordinary maze. At the request of the Night Haunter, the Iron Warriors Primarch Bertrabo had crafted him a singular prison, unlike any other, an imitation of his own private sanctorum known as the Cavea Ferrum. This special prison was an elaborate labyrinth, whose featureless walls and strange geometric design made it all but impossible to map, and therefore escape. Anyone who attempted to mentally map the labyrinth would be hopelessly knotted in turns that should have been physically impossible. Even after trying scores of times to map the labyrinth, an individual would only manage more than a handful of turns within its twisting corridors before it all stopped making sense. In addition, Curze performed ambush attacks, wounding Vulkan without killing him repeatedly. At the edge of his willpower, Vulkan had a vision of the Emperor in the visage of a remembrancer named Varus. The Emperor reminded his son that he would watch over all his sons when he could, and calmed Vulkan's mind, instilling within him fresh resolve. Thus Vulkan goaded Curze, yelling out into the cavernous labyrinth of how all the Primarchs pitied him, and how he was just a child raging in the dark. Curze then opened up a path in the labyrinth to the center, where Dawnbringer rested under an energy shield. There he met the Night Haunter, and they engaged in melee combat. Though armed with a blade, Curze gave into Vulkan's taunts of his physical weakness, and attempted to engage Vulkan with his fists alone. Vulkan easily grabbed Curze and, swinging him like a hammer, broke the energy shield. With his weapon in hand, he managed to overpower his jailer and activate the secret personal teleporter built into the head of the finally wrought Warhammer. Vulkan immediately transported halfway across the galaxy and reappeared in the upper atmosphere of the Ultramarines Legion's homeworld of Macragge. As he fell from an impossible height, his body was burned to a crisp upon re-entry, but before his mind faded into blackness, Vulkan was content that he would soon find himself whole once again, and in the care of his Ultramarines cousins. His violent orbital entry crippled his mind due to the immense pain, making him mentally unstable. Later on, the Night Haunter, who was trapped aboard the Dark Angel's flagship following a failed boarding action during the conclusion of the Thramas Crusade, would eventually make his way to the service of Macragge, wanting to finish what he started and finally kill Vulkan. The ensuing battle would draw in both his Primarch brothers Rupert Gilliman and Lionel Johnson, and a perpetual by the name of John Grammaticus. In the aftermath, the Night Haunter would be defeated, but Vulkan was apparently slain by Grammaticus by the command of the mysterious organization known as the Cabal. Vulkan was stabbed in the heart by Grammaticus with a piece of fulgurite, a large natural hollow glass tube formed beneath the surface of a planet during a lightning strike, the result of the Emperor unleashing his infinite psychic power against the forces of chaos millennia ago. Vulkan's fate following the battle at that time was unknown. Alright guys, thanks a lot for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell to stay tuned for more.